Hey, what's up, guys? This is Harold. This is my first tutorial. I'm making this video so that you guys can learn the basics and foundations of Swift development. And yeah, I'm just going to start right out. The first thing I would like you to do is download Xcode. And before I go into code, I want to briefly review the reasoning why you need to learn code before diving into actually making your app. The primary reason is because as an iOS developer, one of the primary things you use is a design pattern called MVC, or Model View Controller. So with Model View Controller, you are organizing your workflow into three major areas. So number one is going to be the view. And this is actually going to be a place where you are manipulating exactly how your view looks. So where buttons are going, where text is going to go, and how things are laid out for you inside of the view. The other thing is going to be a controller. And the controller is where you'll write some code that will directly impact or manipulate the view. Now, some people like to do their view all in code, but and these beginner tutorials will just go ahead and focus in on actually building your view manually, by drag and drop and so on and so forth. But drag and drop is how you're going to manipulate your view. And the controller is essentially a file where you will write some code that will directly impact your view. And then you will have a model, which is essentially where your code will be for any major data that you have. Usually this will be some code that you have that's holding a lot of your data together and preparing it for the view controller. So the view controller is getting all of its information from its model, which could be some files, a few files that have a lot of data like code in it. Or you may have objects. We'll get a little bit deeper into that later. And when the view controller gets that information, it's going to show and display that inside of the view, as well as manipulate the view. So your controller is essentially dealing with, okay, what happens when a person taps on a button, or what happens when the user types something specific in. And then it will communicate that with its model information or its model data. So it was really important to get that out of the way, because I feel like if I were to, or anyone just starts teaching you about code, essentially you'll start questioning, why am I learning all this code, and what's the purpose, like what's it all leading up to? This is what it leads up to, is you manipulate. This is how you actually build your project. You have your view, you have your controller that's directly impacting and manipulating the view, and then you have your model objects or your model data, which holds all the data that your controller is actually getting its information from, and directly showcasing that information on the view to be displayed. So if you've downloaded Xcode from the App Store, that would be the best way to download it, the way I recommend. When you open up Xcode for the first time, which is Apple software for making and creating apps, you're going to see a window much like this one. This window here is just going to show you on the right-hand side some of your recent projects that you've created, if any, and if you would like to create a project, you have that capability here. What we're going to do today, for the sake of learning code and for the next couple videos is we're going to use a playground. So if we get started with playground, you have a few different options here. We're going to double click on blank. When you double click on blank here, you can name your project and you can decide where it's located. At first for you, it may look like this. If it does, you have the ability to click in this arrow in the upper right hand corner, opens up a bigger view for yourself, and you can actually be very specific about where you would like your file to be saved. So if you go to your home folder, if that's displaying there, you can go to desktop, or you can go to documents. I would probably recommend documents, and I'll do this with you. You can actually create a new folder in the lower left hand corner. When you hit new folder, you can say development, and in here we can create our first project. This won't be like a hello world thing or anything like that. I'm going to get right into learning Swift. So our first lesson is about making properties. Now, I'm a terrible speller, so first thing I'm going to do is go here. Yep, I guess that was right. I was going to spell it right. So I'm going to name this file properties and hit create. And here we go. So first things first, your code is going to look a little bit different than mine looks right now. And one way that you can change this to look different, like for me, it's easier for me to see this with a darker background. You can always go into Xcode, up the upper left-hand corner next to the apple, go down to preferences, and inside of preferences, you can go to fonts and colors. And under fonts and colors, you can select different themes. There's Civic, Civic 2 is something I made. There's the default, Dusk, all these different ones. Midnight's a pretty good one, and there's a lot of other popular ones out there. And the Civic 2 is just a custom one I made. You have the capability of customizing these the way that you like. I recommend going with one of the standard ones for now, and then later you can go back in here and actually change it up. So for the sake of time, let's go ahead and come right back into here, into this window, and let's take a look at how this project or this playground is set up right now. So the first thing is a playground is essentially like a page of scratch paper. So I hate math, but if you ever took a math class, a lot of times you would have like a scratch paper next to you where you could, write your problems out and check the results. One common thing that you're going to see right now, you're going to see throughout the process of developing applications, is whenever you have a file that you're writing your code in, at the top of the file, you're usually going to import certain frameworks, basically certain pre-designed code that you don't have to rewrite over and over and over again. So, for example, they're called frameworks. So Apple makes a lot of them that you can take advantage of so that you don't have to write your own code to do some pretty basic things, or some things that just it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. So for example, right now in this project, and most likely your Swift Playground, you will see import UI kit at the top. UI kit is a UI framework that it's basically for the user interface, and it has a bunch of code in there regarding buttons, touches, the screen, all kinds of things. There's so much inside of UI kit. You'll start to see a lot more of that as we start diving into an actual project. If you're ever curious about anything, you can always hold down the Option key on your keyboard, and you can click on a particular object. It's not giving me information, but you can search documentation. You can also hold the command key, click on something, and jump into the definition of that particular item. And you can look at everything that's included with that thing. It even works for your own code. We'll dive into this a lot later, but I just want you to know that you have access to any of this information. Any object that you call upon that's not something you made, or even if it's something you made, you can always get back to it. For now, I'm going to get rid of the import statement up here because we don't need it. Up top, we also have one other thing. We have these two slashes here, and it says playground, a place where people can play. And essentially that's what it is. You're just here playing with code. These two lines here, however, these are for creating a comment. Anytime you're typing something out, you can't just type whatever you want, like if you want to leave yourself a comment, because the computer is constantly checking every single line to try to see if it is a thing. It's something that it can process or do something with. And anytime you want your program to skip a line or omit something that you wrote, you will have to write two lines here, or do the two backslashes or forward slashes in order to comment a certain line of code out. This is a test, right? So I'm going to get rid of that as well. And what I want to do is I'm going to make a comment up here. Let's make a comment, and we will mark this, all capital, type in mark, colon, and we will say these are variables. And because I am a terrible speller, let's make sure I'm on track. And I am. Okay, that's great. So, variables. Variables will be the first thing you learn here. Essentially, there's times where you're going to be defining something. Like you need to give something a name and tell the computer what it is. Essentially, you're going to be doing this a lot. A variable is something that you define that can be changed or redefined later on down the road. For example, right here, Apple has left this for us. It says var str =, hello playground. So what this means is var, we're telling it that this is a variable, telling the computer that this is a variable. Str is the name that we're assigning that variable. And then the assignment, there's an assignment operator here called =, and we're setting our str variable equal to this these words here, which are called a string, like a string of characters together. So essentially, if I go down to the next line, I can call check it out. str is popping up automatically for us. So this is the first thing you'll understand, is that when you create a variable, you can call it back. The compiler will tell you if you're on track. You never have to memorize your own code, because anytime you start getting in the ballpark with a variable or some other thing you made in the past, it will start pulling it up for you automatically. There's certain rules involving that, but we'll get to that later. So like I was saying, a variable can be changed. A variable can be changed. So that means that I can do the =, again, and I can set this variable equal to something else. It could be equal to Harold. Okay, and one cool thing that we notice about the playgrounds is that in the gutter here on the right hand side, we are seeing instant results for the things that we have done. So this is really useful place to test out some code. I don't use it as much as I should, but this is a great way to just, write some code and see if it works, if you want to test some kind of implementation out. So now that variables can be changed, and you now know that in order to assign a variable or make a variable, you have to start with the keywords var space, and you can name your variable. This could be person or name, and we do the equal sign and Harold. There we go, and we have assigned variable a name, or we've assigned the variable name a value of Harold. Okay, and Harold is a string. Now you could make a variable called age, or height rather, and set it equal to 6'2", and you can do it with numbers as well. However, let's test this out. Let's go name equals 1. Will we get an error? Yes, we will. So there are certain data types that you will need to learn, which we'll probably go over in the next video. There are data types like, numbers, characters, strings, true or false values, things like that, that we will definitely go over together. That way you can understand that. For now, though, you know how to create a variable, something that has the chance of changing or has the capability of changing over time if you wanted it to. Now, it's very important to know how to create a constant. A constant is something that cannot be changed after you've created it. So you can say let name equal, let me comment out my previous name up here. To comment a line out automatically without having to go to the front and do the double backslash, you can do command backslash. And there you go. Or is that forward slash? It's back. Forward. Yeah, it's backslash. So here I'm going to do let. That's the keyword for this. Let name equal Harold. And don't forget, when you're making a string, you're telling the computer that it is a string or a string of characters, you have to use your quotation marks here. And now if I try to reassign the name to, I don't know, Batman, it should give us an error. Yes, it does. Now, what's really awesome about Apple's Xcode software, it's essentially called an IDE. I'm going to be giving you these, I'm going to be giving you some tidbits as we go along, but Xcode is an IDE, an integrated developer environment or development environment. This IDE is really cool because it is constantly giving you recommendations. Apple is taking a lot of time to perfect this software, and it's recommending to us. Let's see what it says. It says, cannot assign to value name. Name is a let a constant. Change let to a var to make it mutable. So this is another thing that you might hear from another developer. You won't hear it from me very often, but something can be mutable or it can be immutable. Right now, constants are immutable, so they cannot be changed. But to make something mutable, you would make it a var. There are other ways to do that. We're not really going to talk about that right now. This is just the basics. So now you know about let and var. These are essentially called properties because usually they are used as properties of a bigger picture, which we'll get to later. But as you can imagine, we made a property called name, a property called height here. Those are properties or attributes of a person. A person would be something like a complete object. So later I'm going to teach you how to make objects and assign properties to those objects. And that will allow you to create whatever you want. You can create a person, create a thing, a special button, like whatever. So the possibilities are endless as you start learning more and more details. So this is all I wanted to cover in the first video. I wanted to make sure we went over variables, constants, the basics of model view controller. That way you understand the big picture. Why are you learning code? Why are you learning all these little things? It's because eventually you want to be able to follow that pattern of creating a view, writing a controller page, lines of code that are manipulating that view. And then you want to be able to create a model, make model objects, or have some data that you're creating to communicate with the controller. And the controller directly manipulates the view that a person might be seeing on their iPhone. Hopefully this video helped you out a lot. Hopefully we kept it under a good time, but I appreciate you enduring this first video. Next video, we will go over data types and possibly another topic to coincide with that, but data types for sure in the next one. Enjoy. Leave any comments down below if you have any questions or anything else I might be able to help with, or any feedback on how this video could have gone a little bit better. Anyway, take care.